It is fun to be a YouTuber. I learn so much about the things I talk about in my videos. Now, I made a video, I think it was yesterday, called MyHeritage, How Ethnicity Predicts Our Religion, which I thought was a pretty cool topic. And some other people have jumped in and said they could appreciate it too. Arthur Hall, he says, interesting take. He was saying similar with my family. My Ashkenazi Jewish family married German Lutherans and Austrian Catholics when they made the U.S. Here's something I learned though from, and I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sure, but Loye Baccarat, I'm pronouncing it wrong, but here's what he said, quote, dude, most Middle Eastern people are Muslims, but most Muslims are not Middle Eastern. I'm still trying to process that. Let me say it again. Most Middle Eastern people are Muslims, but most Muslims are not Middle Eastern. Actually, the country with the single largest populations of Muslims is Indonesia in Southeast Asia, which is on its own hosts 13% of the world's Muslims. About 31% of all Muslims are South Asian origin, like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Therefore, South Asia contains the largest populations of Muslims in the world. Muslims, though they share the same ancestry, they are cousins in blood and carry the same family name. So I would have never thought about that. I always, when I think of the Middle East, I think of, for the most part, Middle Eastern people. And I think of pockets of Christian groups in there, but mainly Muslim. So it's hard to imagine that there's Muslims in other countries and that there's more in those countries. Like, for example, and I think China would be another good example to point out. Apparently there's Chinese Muslims. I can't even fathom it. But I've also heard too that arguably the largest population of Christians is in China, because it's an underground movement. So even though there's obviously I guess I could call it a war on religion in China, and it's not cool just to be a Christian and be out in the open. So like since the 80s, these underground movements of these Christian churches have been happening, and that arguably because of their size, there's more Christians in China than there are in America. I could believe that. I could see how that could be true. So it's interesting to learn, like when I see differences of what I thought was the norm. Oh, there's a lot of Chinese Christians. There's there's Muslims that are Chinese. Like that, either of those could exist, but that so many Muslims could exist outside of the Middle East. Like that's interesting to me. I'm learning from this. So let me say it again. Most Middle Eastern people are Muslims, but most Muslims are not Middle Eastern. So overall, when you look at the whole pie of if this were the Muslims in the world, out of that, let's say this, one big slice of it, yeah, they'd be Middle Eastern, but the rest of the pie, they're not Middle Eastern. The rest of the pie of the Muslims in that pie chart that I'm talking about, not a literal pie, but the pie chart, most of those Muslims would be from different ethnicities in different countries than we'd expect. So it is interesting when we think of people of religions other than what we think that they are. And I think Africa would be another example. Africa has a lot of Muslims. Africa has a lot of Christians. Africa has a lot of people who believe different things altogether than some of the things we've even heard of. So it is interesting. I'm fascinated by still though how our ethnicity is still a good predictor of what religion we're going to be. I mean, even if you're Scandinavian, modern day Scandinavian, live in Scandinavia, I understand some of the most atheist people in the entire world, no religion. So what is it about living so far up on the top of the world in super northern Europe that makes them less likely to believe in God? And it's interesting. It's interesting how our ethnicity leads to where we live, or where we live is related to our ethnicity, which ultimately relates to the likelihood of what religion we're going to be. I think that's fascinating. So I'm grateful for these comments, and I'm glad to know that video was relevant for you.